My hands shook as I held the letter, its edges yellowed and brittle, the ink smudged from years hidden in the attic's shadows. "She won't touch it." "But you will," my son-in-law growled, his voice low and jagged, like he'd swallowed glass. I stood frozen in my own kitchen, the air thick with the scent of burnt toast and the faint hum of the refrigerator. His eyes, cold and unyielding, pinned me to the spot. My daughter, your mother, sat at the table, her head bowed, refusing to meet my gaze. The letter trembled in my fingers, its weight heavier than the secrets it held. I was speechless, my heart pounding like it did all those years ago, when I first buried the truth. "It's late now, my darlings," as I sit here in my rocking chair, the one your grandfather carved before you were born. The house is quiet, save for the creak of the floorboards and the soft patter of rain against the windows in our little Ohio home. The living room smells of lavender and old books, the kind of comfort that wraps around you like a quilt. But tonight, comfort feels far away. I'm telling you this story, my grandchildren, because you deserve to know who I was before I was just Nana. You deserve to know why that letter, and your father's words, cracked open a wound I thought I'd stitched shut long ago. It was 1962, and I was 25, living in a small clapboard house just outside Dayton. The air carried the scent of hay and motor oil, the fields stretching out like an endless green sea under a sky that always seemed too big. I was married to your grandfather, Henry, a man whose laugh could fill a room, but whose silences could choke it. We were happy, or so I told myself, until the day I found the photograph tucked inside his work boots. A woman, young and radiant, with eyes like a storm and a smile that didn't belong to me. Her name, scrawled on the back in his handwriting. Eleanor. "Henry, who is she?" I asked that evening, holding the photograph out like it was a live wire. We were in the kitchen, the same one where your mother sits now, though back then it had peeling linoleum and a single bulb flickering overhead. The smell of his cigarette hung heavy, curling like a ghost between us. He didn't look at me. "Nobody," he said, his voice flat, stubbing out the cigarette on his plate. "Just someone from before." "Before?" My voice cracked, sharp enough to cut. "Before us?" He stood, his chair scraping the floor, and walked out into the dusk without another word. The screen door slammed, and I was left with the photograph burning in my hand, my heart a knot of betrayal and questions I didn't dare ask. I wanted to tear it up, to burn it, but instead, I hid it in a tin box under the floorboards, along with a letter I found later. A letter from Eleanor, confessing her love for Henry and begging him to leave me. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my sister, not even God in my prayers. I carried that secret like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold, through the years that followed. Henry and I went on, raising your mother, building a life that looked whole from the outside. But every time he was late coming home, every time he stared too long at the horizon, I wondered if he was thinking of her. I wondered if I was the fool who stayed. Now, here in the present, your father's words echo in my mind. "She won't touch it, but you will." He'd found the letter, my darlings, the one I'd hidden all those years ago. Your mother, my sweet Ellen, had been cleaning out the attic with him, sorting through boxes of old clothes and Christmas decorations. They found the tin box, the one I thought was safe under the loose floorboard. I don't know how he knew to bring it to me, how he knew it was mine, but he did. And when he slammed it on the kitchen table, the sound was like a gunshot in my heart. "Mom, what is this?" Ellen asked, her voice small, like she was a child again. She held the photograph, Eleanor's face staring up at us, unchanged by time. "Why didn't you tell me?" I wanted to explain, to say something that would make it right, but my throat was dry. My words stuck like dust. The kitchen smelled of the coffee I'd brewed that morning, now cold in the pot, and the rain outside grew louder, tapping the windows like it wanted in. I could feel the weight of their eyes, your mother's, hurt and searching, your father's, sharp with something like accusation. I couldn't, I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't lose him. Ellen's face crumpled, and she pushed the photograph away, her fingers trembling. You kept this from me my whole life? From Dad? Your father, Tom, leaned forward, his knuckles white on the table. You let her grow up thinking he was perfect. You let us all think it. And now this? He gestured to the letter, his voice rising. You owe her the truth, Margaret. All of it. The truth. Oh, my darlings. How do you tell the truth when it's a blade that cuts both ways? I sat down, the chair cold against my legs, and looked at my daughter. Her eyes, so like Henry's, held a pain I'd never wanted her to know. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, and that small gesture broke something in me. I was afraid, I said, my voice steadier now, though it hurt to speak. Afraid of losing him, of losing us. I thought if I kept it hidden, it would go away, but it never did. The rain outside was a steady drum now, and the kitchen felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of memory. I could still see Henry's face that night in 1962, the way he wouldn't look at me, the way his silence said more than words ever could. I could still feel the roughness of the photograph in my hand, the way it smelled faintly of leather from his boots. And I could still hear Eleanor's words in that letter, each one a needle in my heart. I love him, Margaret. I always will. I looked at Ellen, her face pale under the kitchen light, and I knew I couldn't keep running from this. Not anymore. I'll tell you everything, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. But you have to understand. I did it for love. For your father. For you. Tom snorted, folding his arms. Love doesn't hide lies. Tom? Please, Ellen said, her voice sharp now, though her eyes stayed on me. Let her talk. And so I began, my darlings, to unravel the story I'd kept locked away. The story of a young woman who loved too fiercely, who chose silence over truth, who built a life on a foundation of secrets. As I spoke, the rain slowed, and the lavender scent in the room seemed to fade, replaced by the memory of hay and motor oil, of a summer night when everything changed. I don't know if you'll forgive me, my grandchildren, or if your mother will, but I owe you this story, every painful piece of it, because love, real love, demands the truth, even when it hurts. The rain has stopped now, my darlings, leaving the house wrapped in a heavy stillness. I'm still in my rocking chair, the wood creaking under me as I sway, the living room lit only by the soft glow of the lamp on the side table. The air smells faintly of damp earth through the cracked window, mingling with the lavender that lingers like a memory. My hands rest in my lap, empty now, but I can still feel the ghost of that letter, its brittle edges cutting into my palms. Your mother, Ellen, and your father, Tom, are gone back to their house across town. The photograph and letter left behind on my kitchen table like an accusation. I didn't want to keep going with this story tonight, but I can't stop. Not now. You need to know what happened after that night in 1962, when I hid Eleanor's photograph and letter, and tried to pretend my world hadn't shifted. It was late summer, 1963, a year after I found the photograph. The Ohio fields were golden, heavy with corn ready for harvest, and the air carried the sharp tang of dust and sweet clover. Our little house felt smaller that year, the walls pressing in with every unspoken word between me and your grandfather, Henry. I was pregnant with your mother then, my belly just starting to swell, and I thought maybe a child would stitch us back together. But Henry was different, distant, his laughs fewer, his silences longer. I'd catch him staring out the window at dusk, his eyes lost somewhere I couldn't follow, and I'd wonder if he was thinking of Eleanor. One evening, I found him in the barn, the air thick with the smell of hay and motor oil, his hands greasy from tinkering with the old tractor. The lantern cast long shadows, flickering across his face as he worked. I'd come to call him for supper, but something stopped me at the door. A letter, folded neatly on the workbench, not hidden like the last one. My heart thudded, a sick, heavy beat, as I picked it up. It was from her again. Eleanor, meet me at the creek, tomorrow at dusk. I need to see you. No signature, but I knew her handwriting, those sharp, elegant loops. Henry, I said, my voice sharper than I meant, holding the letter out. The paper shook in my hand, and the barn seemed to tilt. What is this? He froze, his wrench clattering to the floor, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet. He turned, his face pale under the lantern's glow, and for a moment I saw fear in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, fear. Margaret, he started, then stopped, wiping his hands on his jeans. It's not what you think. Then tell me, I shouted, my voice echoing off the barn walls. The baby kicked inside me, a sharp jab, and I pressed a hand to my stomach, steadying myself. Tell me why she's still writing to you. Why you're meeting her. He stepped closer, his boots scuffing the dirt floor, and reached for me. I flinched, and he stopped, his hands falling to his sides. I haven't seen her, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. Not since before we married. She won't let go, Margaret. I told her it's over. Over? I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't feel like mine. Then why is this here? Why didn't you burn it? He looked away, his jaw tight, and the silence was worse than any answer. I crumpled the letter and threw it at his feet, the paper landing in the dust like a dead thing. If you go to her, I said, my voice shaking, don't come back. I walked out, the cool night air hitting my face, sharp with the scent of coming rain. My hands were trembling, my heart a storm of anger and fear. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was carrying your mother, and every step felt like it could break me. That night I lay awake, the bed cold beside me, listening to the crickets and the distant hum of the highway. I thought of Eleanor, her storm-gray eyes, her words in that letter, and I wondered what hold she had on him that I didn't. The next day, I followed him. I don't know what possessed me, my darlings, but I couldn't stay in that house, waiting like a fool. I left a note saying I was visiting my sister, bundled myself in a shawl, and drove our old pickup to the creek, parking far enough away that he wouldn't see. The air was heavy with the smell of wet leaves and mud, the creek gurgling softly under the setting Sunday. I hid behind a cluster of willows, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would give me away. And there she was, Eleanor. She stood by the water, her dark hair catching the last light, her dress clinging to her like she was part of the landscape. Henry approached, his steps slow, his shoulders hunched. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw her reach for him, her hand grazing his arm. He didn't pull away. My breath caught, sharp and painful, and I pressed a hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. Then he stepped back, shaking his head, and her face twisted anger, maybe, or heartbreak. She handed him another letter, and he took it, tucking it into his pocket before turning away. I drove home before he could see me, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. That night, he came home late, smelling of the creek and something sharper, like regret. He didn't speak, and I didn't ask, but I knew then that Eleanor wasn't just a ghost from his past, she was a shadow in our present, and I was losing him to her, piece by piece. Back in the now, my darlings, I look at the letter on the kitchen table, the one Tom found in the attic. It's not the one from the barn, not the one from the creek. It's older, the first one, the one I hid all those years ago. But seeing it again, feeling its weight, brings back that summer, that betrayal, and the choice I made to stay silent. I think of your mother's face tonight, the hurt in her eyes when she saw Eleanor's photograph. And I know I've hurt her by keeping this secret. I've hurt you all. Mom, why didn't you leave him? Ellen asked before she left, her voice soft but cutting. She stood in the doorway, her coat half on, Tom behind her with that same hard look in his eyes. I wanted to say I stayed for her, for the family we built, for the love I still had for Henry despite everything. But the words felt hollow. So I just said, I thought I could fix it. Tom shook his head, his voice cold. You fixed nothing. You just buried it. They left. And now I'm alone with this story, my darlings, piecing it together for you. I buried Eleanor's letters, but I couldn't bury the pain. And now, with the truth spilling out, I'm afraid of what comes next. Did Henry meet her again? Did he love her all those years? The questions I avoided then are clawing their way back, and I know I have to face them for your mother, for you, for myself. The rain may have stopped, but the storm inside me is just beginning. The morning light creeps through the curtains, pale and thin, painting the living room in soft grays. I'm still in my rocking chair, my darlings, though my bones ache from sitting too long. The air smells of last night's rain and the faint must of old wood, the house settling around me like it's holding its breath. The letter and photograph sit on the coffee table now, moved from the kitchen, staring up at me like they're waiting for me to finish what I started. I didn't sleep, not really, just drifted in and out of memories, each one sharper than the last. Your mother's hurt, Tom's anger, they've stirred up the past, and I can't keep it buried any longer. I owe you the rest of this story, the part where I faced the truth, or tried to, and the moment everything broke open. It was autumn 1964, a year after I saw Henry with Eleanor at the creek. The Ohio air was crisp, heavy with the scent of fallen leaves and chimney smoke. Your mother, Ellen, was a chubby 6-month-old, her giggles filling our little house like sunlight. But even her warmth couldn't thaw the cold between me and Henry. We moved through our days like strangers sharing a stage, polite but distant. Our conversations clipped to necessities. Supper, bills, the baby. I'd stopped asking about Eleanor, stopped looking for letters, but her shadow lingered in every silence, every time Henry's eyes drifted to the horizon. One evening, I was in the bedroom, folding Ellen's tiny clothes, the air thick with the powdery smell of talc and clean cotton. Henry came in, his boots heavy on the floorboards, his face drawn like he'd been carrying something too long. He held a letter, not hidden this time, but open in his hand, the paper fresh and white. My stomach twisted, and I set the onesie down, my fingers cold. Margaret, he said, his voice rough, like it hurt to speak. We need to talk. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to run, to scoop up Ellen and drive into the night, but my feet stayed rooted. Is it her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The room felt small, the walls pressing in, the air sharp with the scent of his leather jacket and the faint tang of whiskey. He nodded, slow, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in months. She's sick, he said. Dying. She wrote to say goodbye. I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that startled me. Goodbye? After all this time, she's still here, Henry. In our house. In our marriage. He flinched, the letter crumpling in his hand. I didn't ask for this, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't ask for her to love me, or to keep writing. I told her to stop, Margaret. I told her I chose you. Chose me? My voice rose, and I heard Ellen stir in her crib down the hall, a soft whimper. I lowered my tone, but the anger burned hotter. You chose me, but you kept her letters. You met her at the creek. Don't lie to me, Henry. I saw you. His face went white, his mouth opening, then closing. The silence was deafening, broken only by the tick of the clock on the dresser and the faint creak of the house. He sank onto the bed, the letter falling to the floor, and buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, his voice muffled. I went to tell her to leave me alone, to leave us alone. But she was desperate, Margaret. She said she had no one else. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to tear the letter to pieces. Instead, I stood there, my hands shaking, the smell of talc turning sour in my throat. And what about me? I asked, my voice trembling. What about us? Did you ever think about what this did to me? He looked up, his eyes wet, and for the first time, I saw the man I'd married, not the one who'd betrayed me, but the one who'd carved this rocking chair, who'd danced with me in the kitchen to a scratchy radio. I love you, he said, the words raw. I always have. Eleanor was a mistake, a moment. You're my life. I didn't know if I believed him. I wanted to. God help me. But the pain was a living thing, clawing at my chest. I picked up the letter, my hands steady now, and read her words. I'm dying, Henry. I just wanted you to know I never stopped loving you. Forgive me. I dropped it, the paper fluttering like a wounded bird, and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. That was the twist. My darlings, the moment I realized Eleanor wasn't just a rival, but a woman as broken as I was, clinging to a love that wasn't hers. I hated her, but I pitied her too. And that pity made my anger sharper, more confusing. I didn't tell Henry what I felt. I didn't tell anyone. I buried that letter with the others, under the floorboards, and told myself we could move on. But we didn't. Not really. Now, here in the present, I sit with the weight of that choice. The letter on the coffee table, the one Tom found, is the first one, Eleanor's confession of love, from 1962, but there are others hidden still. And I know I have to show them to your mother. She deserves the full truth, not just the pieces I've let slip. The house is quiet, but I can still hear Tom's voice from last night, sharp and accusing. You fixed nothing. You just buried it. He's right, and that truth stings more than I want to admit. I think of calling Ellen, of sitting her down and telling her everything, how I stayed with Henry, how I forgave him, or tried to, for her sake. But the words feel heavy, like stones I can't lift. I imagine her voice, soft but firm, asking, "Why didn't you leave, Mom? Why didn't you fight for yourself?" And I don't know if I have an answer she'll understand. I stayed because I loved him, because I loved her, because I thought family was worth the pain. But was it? The room feels colder now, the damp air seeping through the window, carrying the faint smell of wet grass. My fingers trace the arm of the rocking chair, the wood smooth from years of use, and I think of Henry, gone now, his laughter silenced by time. I think of Eleanor, dead long before him, her letters the only piece of her left. And I think of you, my grandchildren, who'll hear this story one day and judge me not just as Nana, but as a woman who made choices she can't undo. I stand, my knees creaking, and pick up the letter and photograph. They feel lighter now, like confessing has loosened their grip. But the story isn't over. There's one more piece, one more moment when everything came to a head, and I have to tell it. For you, for Ellen, for myself. The rain may be gone, but the storm inside me is building to its peak, and I'm not sure I'm ready for what comes next. The afternoon sun slants through the living room window, casting long shadows across the floorboards, warming the air with a faint golden glow. I'm still here, my darlings, in my rocking chair, the letter and photograph now tucked into the pocket of my cardigan, close to my heart like a wound I can't let go. The house smells of dust and the faint sweetness of the apple pie I baked this morning, hoping it might draw Ellen back to talk. The pie sits untouched on the counter, its crust cooling, the kitchen silent, except for the distant drip of the faucet. I've been sitting here, piecing together the end of this story for you, my grandchildren, because the truth I've carried all these years is finally spilling out, and I can't stop until it's done. It was spring 1965. The air alive, with the scent of blooming lilacs and fresh-turned earth. Your mother, Ellen, was a year old, toddling through the house with her chubby hands grabbing at everything. Our little clapboard home in Ohio felt fuller with her in it. Her laughter a bandage over the cracks in my marriage to Henry. But those cracks were still there, jagged and deep, even after Eleanor's last letter, the one saying she was dying. I thought her death would end it, that Henry and I could rebuild. I was wrong. One evening, I was in the backyard, hanging laundry on the line, the damp cotton sheets cool against my fingers, the breeze carrying the sharp tang of grass and spring mud. Henry was inside with Ellen, or so I thought, until I heard the crunch of gravel under tires. I turned, expecting a neighbor, but it was a car I didn't know, a sleek black sedan, out of place on our dusty road. A woman stepped out, older than me, her face lined but fierce, her eyes the same storm gray as Eleanor's. My heart stopped. I knew, without being told, that this was her mother. "Margaret?" she called, her voice sharp, cutting through the evening air. I dropped the sheet, the clothespin clattering to the ground, and walked toward her, my legs heavy like I was wading through water. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, though my hands shook. "Who are you?" She didn't answer, just pulled a small box from her purse, wooden and worn, and thrust it at me. "Eleanor wanted you to have this," she said, her words clipped, her eyes burning with something between grief and anger. "She said you'd understand." I took the box, its weight surprising, and opened it. Inside was a locket, silver and tarnished, and a folded note. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it, the paper soft from being handled too many times. "Margaret, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Keep this for him, for when he's ready." It was Eleanor's handwriting, unmistakable, and the locket held a tiny photograph of her and Henry, young and smiling, from a time before me. "Where's Henry?" the woman asked, her voice softer now, but still edged with pain. "I need to see him." I wanted to lie, to send her away, but the truth was a tide I couldn't hold back. "He's inside," I said, my voice barely audible. I led her into the house, the air inside thick with the smell of Ellen's mashed peas and Henry's cigarette smoke. He was in the living room, bouncing Ellen on his knee, and when he saw us, his face went ashen. "Clara," he said, standing Ellen in his arms. "What are you doing here?" Clara, Eleanor's mother, didn't flinch. "She's gone," she said, her voice breaking. "My girl is gone, and she wanted you to know. She wanted her to know." She pointed at me, and the room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in with the weight of her words. Henry set Ellen in her high chair, his hands shaking, and took a step toward Clara. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. I didn't know she was that sick." "You knew enough," Clara snapped, her eyes flashing. "You knew she loved you, and you let her hope. You let her die with that hope." I stood frozen, the locket burning in my hand, Eleanor's note a knife in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw the locket at Henry, to demand why he'd let this shadow linger over us. Instead, I said, "Why me? Why give this to me?" Clara turned, her eyes softening just a fraction. "Because she said you were strong, stronger than her. She said you'd know what to do." I didn't feel strong. I felt betrayed, hollowed out, like the wind could blow right through me. Clara left without another word, her car disappearing into the dusk, and Henry and I stood in the living room, Ellen babbling softly, oblivious to the storm around her. I looked at him, the man I'd loved, the man I'd fought for, and I saw a stranger. "Did you love her?" I asked, my voice steady now, though my heart was breaking. "Tell me the truth, Henry." He sank into a chair, his head in his hands, and for a long moment, he didn't speak. When he did, his voice was barely a whisper. I did. Once. But not like I love you. It wasn't enough. But it was all I had. I kept the locket, hid it with the letters under the floorboards, and we never spoke of Eleanor again. Henry died 10 years later. A heart attack in the barn. And I buried him with the truth still locked away. I thought I was protecting your mother, protecting our family, but I was wrong. Now, my darlings, I'm back in the present, the locket and letters in my cardigan pocket, the pie still untouched on the counter. I called Ellen this morning, asked her to come over, and she's on her way. The house feels alive again, the air humming with the anticipation of truth. When she arrives, I'll show her everything: the locket, the letters, the note from Eleanor's mother. I'll tell her about that spring evening, the confrontation that broke me open, and the choice I made to stay. I hear her car now, the gravel crunching, and my heart races, a mix of fear and relief. I stand, my knees unsteady, and open the door. Ellen steps inside, her face softer than last night, but her eyes still guarded. Mom, she says, her voice quiet. Are you ready to tell me everything? I nod, leading her to the kitchen table, where I lay out the locket, the photograph, the letters. As I speak, the words come easier, the weight lifting with each one. I tell her about love, about betrayal, about the strength it took to stay and the weakness it took to hide. I tell her I'm sorry, that I wanted her to have a father she could love, not one tarnished by truth. When I finish, Ellen takes my hand, her fingers warm, and for the first time, I feel forgiveness. Not complete, not yet, but a start. I wish you'd told me, she says, tears in her eyes. But I understand why you didn't. My darlings, this is my legacy to you. Love is messy, and so is truth. I hid mine to protect you, but secrets only fester. Tell your stories, even the painful ones, because they make you whole. As I sit here, the sun setting, the house smelling of pie and possibility, I know I've done what I could. The rest is up to you.